Welcome everyone. My name is Maria Gabriel Saint-Jambert. I'm a senior researcher here at the Peace Research Institute Oslo. And it is a great honor and a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Luka Biong Deng here at PRIO for this seminar that we have co-organized with CMI, the research center in Bergen. Unfortunately, our colleague Gunnar Sørberg from CMI, the Christian Michelsen Institute, was not able to be here today, but as you know, Luka, he sent you his greetings. For those following Sudan on a regular basis, and for all our friends from Sudan here, Dr. Luka Biong Deng does not really need to be introduced. But I will say a few words still before giving you the floor for your talk that promises to be extremely interesting. Dr. Luka Biong Deng served as a Minister of Cabinet Affairs for the National Government of Sudan until May 2011. He also served as a Minister of Presidential Affairs for the Government of South Sudan and has previously worked as a Senior Economist for the World Bank. You were also Executive Director of the new Sudan Center for Census, Statistics and Evaluation, and have been involved in a various range of important committees and tasks in South Sudan over the past few years. I think that your extensive experience in both the field of politics and academia give you a unique position to talk about the highly timely and challenging issues that Sudan faces today, that South Sudan faces and Sudan faces, the two Sudans that we have to be used to talking about Sudan as the two Sudans now. And more specifically, the challenges related to the management of the oil resources and the relation that the new state of South Sudan has to build with its northern neighbor in the coming years. I will give you the floor right away. And we will present this paper, which is a basis for a collaboration with CMI on a publication on challenges related to resource issues. And we will have time after your talk for questions from the audience. So I'm looking forward to having your questions and for an interesting discussion. Please, Dr. Luka Biong Deng, the floor is yours.
First of all, I'm so happy and delighted to be here and for all of you for turning up to attend this presentation. But as usual, I would like also to register my profound appreciation to the peoples and government of Norway for always continuing to be a country that we look up to as showing itself in the solidarity with the people of South Sudan. But indeed, I believe that we'll continue doing the same for building this new state of the Republic of South Sudan. In particular, Maria and for my colleague Gunnar, who is not here, for organizing this. He came from Sudan and he's sick, and I hope he will recover. I know I don't want to. I'm picking up this issue because it's an issue that I felt it is so important for the new state of the Republic of South Sudan. But it's involving a lot of issues to do with the relationship with the North, but indeed also the relationship with the international community. Maybe it is rather very academic oriented, and I hope I'm not going to bother you. That's the basis upon which I prepared this paper, being a visiting fellow at the Institute of Development Studies in the United Kingdom. So I will bother you with some certain things of how best I would like to shape and to analyze the situation in South Sudan in that context. Maybe I would like to highlight some few points and just about the whole of resource curves and whether we can have a diagnostic typology of what is called the resource curves. And based on that framework to see whether South is really vulnerable to the resource curse and what could be done and options. And then some conclusion. In the conclusion, I will be focusing on basically on the current. I think there is no doubt that this new state of the Republic of South Sudan is very a populist state. A new state, number 193, it got a unanimous acceptance by the member state, and it's in a very emotional way. And this came as a result of a long-standing struggle of the people of South Sudan. And it's a reflection of the commitment of the international community for the comprehensive peace agreement. And this new state, everybody was looking forward to see it as a viable state and to promote peace and stability in the region. But also, it came as a result of the strong will of the people of South Sudan. I think the way they conducted the referendum with civility, which actually shocked everybody. But indeed also came as a result of a real goodwill by the international community. When people were having this new state, there were a lot of, should I start with, think with optimism. Now, with this optimism, also there are a lot of concern about this new state. Some start arguing that this state is actually a failed state before it is born. But indeed, this state is entered into three categories. I put it there, the top billion people, and then the middle 4 billion people, and then the bottom billion people. And I think if you look to the bottom billion group of the world, these are the countries that are facing basically fundamental traps, what I call, this Collier said conflict. Traps of conflict, or trap of natural resources, or trap of landlocked and bad neighbors, and the trap of bad governance. So it will not take you a lot of efforts for you to reposition this new state. And what I put here is not only falling within the bottom billion, but actually bottom of the bottom billion. I will show to you the indicators. Now, this is how I want to reposition South Sudan in relation to the bottom billion countries and the other developing countries. You could clearly see how South is, just if you take these indicators, life expectancy, infant mortality, and child malnutrition. Definitely you will take it into the lower level of the bottom billion. Now the question is South Sudan vulnerable to resource curse as one of the traps that facing the world, the bottom billion? And is it possible that this country can put itself on the right track in terms of growth to avoid the perils of resource curse? But let me review this idea of resource curse, because it's an issue that has come up that is very important to refresh about mind, because I'm going to use it effectively. It is quite puzzling and very amazing that having resources becoming a curse. And it's simple because by the time you believe this country is facing shortage of either saving or the bottlenecks of foreign exchange, then having resources are becoming a curse. And it's a very, but there's no doubt there's a very growing empirical evidence consistently showing that the oil-rich countries tend to perform poorly in terms of economic growth. So it's not unique, it has been observed. But in fact, the concept of the resource curse is that the large natural resources revenues is so economic performance. Now, sometimes there's a myth when we talk about the resource curse. Usually there's a dominant thinking that the Dutch disease seems to be the main, but I think there are certain components when we talk about the resource curse. We have the Dutch disease approach. We have also the rent-seeking approach. And then the volatility approach, is specialization approach, and then the last one, the political economy approach. These are the components of what constitute what we call the Dutch disease, the resource curse. I would use those parameters in order to assess whether the South is exposed to some of these. Not to waste your time about the Dutch disease approach, is a clear example of the Dutch experience in 1970s when they discovered the gas in the North Sea. And what happened afterwards, they observed a very clear case of a poor economic performance. And this poor economic performance, the Dutch disease, is caused by the fact that the negative effect of the natural resources from the export boom that affect the traditional sector. But importantly, I think when you talk about the Dutch disease, there are two things that we need to put in mind. The resource movement effect, I will talk about it, and then the spending effect. The resource movement effect is the fact that if you have two sectors, you have a booming economy, a booming sector, then you have tradable sector, and then you have non-tradable sector. That what is happening when you have a boom is that there's a shift of a level moving out from to the non-sector, moving all the resources away from the traditional sector. And that resulted into what we call the slope in the growth. And then the spending effect is that because of the boom itself, of the export boom, then you have to have extra spending on the non-tradable. And that itself draining the another cycle of effect. And this is what we call the so you need to look at those things from the aspect that that is an isolation of the year. But this one has been challenged in a sense that, is it real? But there are a lot of very clear country experience and study indicating that in actual fact, countries perform differently. Just give you an example of this, is that this is if you take 1960 to 1980, this is the period of economic boom, and in 1980, in 1998, this is where we have an oil crisis. And I think people have shown that actually the oil exporters countries perform extremely well during the good times of crisis, but poorly during the bad times. So that one is not supporting very much the argument for the Dutch disease. So that is so let us look at the Dutch disease as one of the components of when we talk about the resource curse. The rent-seeking approach is coming in the way that these countries, whenever they have resources, they tend to perform poorly in terms of economic development, because you tend to have people fighting over a windfall and not focus on the real productive sector. And this is reflecting the behavior of the government in terms of the expenditure, in terms of so that's what we say that this government, this issue of overgrazing of the commons, and then the issues of common pool problem, the issue of property rights, because this is and what is happening is that you have this could result in because of natural resources, all the economy, the actors in the economy, they focus only on the fighting around the existing resources rather than looking to the real economy, and you tend to see a very clear way of distortion of the allocation of spending, and then the government not having a social or physical compact with the people, and then also a very weak savings compact. There's a lot of argument around the rent-seeking. But then this issue also has been questioned because this is not only unique to the resource-rich countries only. It is across the world. This is another example of questioning it, that this one may not be very strong argument for that. Then there's a lot of thing about the volatility, because what people say, when you see the poor performance of these governments is having a resource, an abundance of natural resources, then these countries is exactly because of the volatility itself. the volatility is just like a tax on investment. And what we are seeing is that the people argue that it is actually not about the dash disease, about the volatility of first the prices of the oil prices or natural resource prices tend to be quite volatile than the other commodities. But then people shifted to the aspect of it's not also about the volatility of the prices, of oil prices, but the volatility of the, then this results in what we call the volatility effect. Because people, they tend to spend more, and when you have a very shock in the prices, people, they don't adjust. And that resulted even more volatility in terms of the government reacting to any volatility. And this is, people say this is a powerful explanation of what we are seeing. It could explain the resource curves. But then this one also has been questioned because people say actually the volatility by itself could not tantamount for a poor performance, economic performance. Now, then the last one is about the specialization approach. And this is the whole thing is just re-arguing about the resource curves in terms of the specialization. Because if a country, because of the fact that have more resources, they tend to specialize but not in an efficient way. And that itself could explain the issue of a poor performance of the countries experiencing some people manage to categorize the countries to nationally specialized countries and inefficiently specialized countries and then diversified countries. And they say the diversified countries tend to perform better whenever they have resources. The previous approaches are economic dominance explanation of the resource curves. But then the political scientists came into the whole argument. They say the actual what we are observing of the resource curve is because of the quality of institutions and governance and policies. And that's a very big shift in the whole argument. And that dominant thinking shifted from the economists now to the political scientists. And I think it seems to be quite a very powerful appealing to in understanding the Dutch disease. And if you look at the typology of the states, they look at the mature democracies tend to perform better, but the factional democracies tend to perform not very good. But autocracies, surprisingly, but we see, they tend not to perform well, but I think in most cases, sometimes they perform better than the factional democracies. So the whole argument shifted to the whole lot of governance. And it's quite appealing and a very powerful. Now, but then people questioning it also. A lot of question mark about whether this can explain and what do we mean by the governance. But even in the discussion of governance, there's what is called political dash disease, because they say more resources you have, actually that one impedes democracy. But even people went further than that and becoming, what we are saying is that the democracy itself, we are seeing democracy now getting into the oil economies, but even oil is spreading to the low income democracy. But it's very difficult also to say that democracy per se can explain this phenomenon of the resource curves. And people focus basically when we talk about democracy, the aspect of the check and balance as more important rather than the mere elections and a democratic institution to be established. Now, based on this one, I decided to use a diagnostic typology of where to position when to analyze the South. So we have political categories and then economic categories. And these are the examples of these countries. And these are the parameters with which you can really see whether the country can perform well or not. As you can see clearly, fractional democracy and having an efficiently specialized economy, Venezuela and Nigeria seem to be giving a good example, and this is what I would like to use where the South may be positioned. For example, Norway is a good example, although one is not sure about a mature democracy, but diversified economies, which tend to have a very good performance. But if you take extreme like Saudi Arabia, as autocracy and national especially, because Saudi Arabia, whether there's no need for them to specialize, and they tend to perform very, very poorly on those aspects. Now, is South Sudan vulnerable to resource curse? And this is how I want these issues of the oil in the south. As you could clearly see, the whole area of the south is. But then the fundamental question: how much oil does the south have? This is from the existing oil production. As you can clearly see here, the initial oil reserve and then the remaining oil reserve. You could clearly see hardly now the south is having around nearly 1 billion reserve, 1.3 billion reserve. It used to be 2.3, but over the years it has been exhausted. You are left with roughly about 1.3. These 1.3 over years, if you have the current production, you cannot take them for almost about 12 years. So really, we're not talking about very huge oil. And that is, I think it's very important even when I will refer these to issues when we talk about the issue of pipelines, and because you have to determine, actually it's actually very small, and it will not be taking the, and this is the projection over years. You could see clearly even it will peak, the whole production will peak in 2010, but it is like it's going to get down to less than 50% in 2019. If we use the existing production and the producing oil field. So really you have a problem at the south, but that I don't want to take it, you are considering a lot of information are not there. There's a possibility that a lot could be discovered. I think the indications seem to be, many people, experts, they talk that the south has a huge potential. But from the existing information, you're just telling us that it's not that very huge. I use some work also to besides the producing oil field, I use also to project from the non-producing oil fields. For example, you have Total is having a very huge area. Just using certain forecasts to see what is really there. As you can see, from non-oil producing oil field, it is likely that the South may have something near to 6 or 7 billion barrels. And that can take them, if those potential there, then you have a potential of will take them for about 70 years. But there's a very conviction that the South seems to be sitting on a huge resource. For me, I would go for a very pessimistic scenario of that. Actually, what we have is not enough, really. But I think, but most of the analysts, they believe that they have a lot of resources. Now, it is very important when you talk about the oil sector, there are a lot of risks involved. One is the existing oil infrastructure. You are hearing now what is happening about the oil refineries and pipelines. It's a huge risk. A country depending on infrastructure from outside another country, because it's a landlocked country. The whole of the North-South border and the relationship, as you could see clearly, is affecting, because these are factors that will affect the investors in terms of how much they can invest in this sector. Because the North-South borders needs to be quite flexible, and it needs to have a good relationship so that the South could use the existing infrastructure in the North. I did some work on the existing oil contracts. These are contracts signed during a war period, and I think they have a lot desired to be reviewed by the government of South Sudan. Those ones also could send a very high risk for these countries. For example, you have a huge blocks. I use certain parameters to assess what about this contract, whether it is appropriate for the South now to review. The whole lot of alternative pipelines is putting a lot of risk also for the investment in this sector. I think there's a whole lot about East-West politics of investment. Chinese, Western countries, and in the area, and even the behavior of the South sometimes is misread, whether by Chinese as if there's a very clear Western agenda, in the way the South is taking these decisions around that nationalistic agenda. So you have a lot of risk involved in this sector. Now, one of the things that I look at is to what level South is so vulnerable to the resource curse. This is an example of oil dependency of this economy. If you look at the oil exports, virtually are saying that you are exporting virtually oil. And if you look at the oil as part of the GDP, gross domestic product, almost the whole economy, more than 60% of the gross domestic product coming from the oil. And when you look at the relationship with oil revenue and total revenue, you see virtually it's oil. Everything is oil. So there's a very serious dependence on oil of this economy. If you go to the macroeconomic impact in terms of the per capita income, you could clearly see that the South, if you use this income, is almost twice like Kenya. It is almost 3 times of Uganda. It's almost, I could say, 6 times or 5 times of Ethiopia. This is a very huge in terms of per capita income. And this is the macroeconomic impact you can think of. But this now you're assuming that everybody is getting a share from the oil. But look at the livelihood indicators. You see, despite this high per capita income, you have the South is really so behind on these living conditions. Just you look at the literacy rate, you could see the South is just is incomparable to the rest of these countries. But even in terms of infant mortality rate, you could see clearly the South is far, I think, the worst record in the world. But if you go to maternal mortalities, so having these huge income per capita not reflected in actual living conditions is a very serious issue for this economy. So this is a macroeconomic implication of having oil. But then, what are the real forecasts do we have from the existing oil production? What we are seeing is that over years, is that the GDP maybe is slowing down. And this is a very good sign when you talk about the source curse, is that you are going to have a poor performance in economic growth. And this is a clear example of the symptoms itself, because the economy is not actually getting itself in order to really generate a real growth in the economy. So it's a real symptom that the economy is going to slow down over time. This is a good example of resource movement effect. I think that's when you look at the oil as part of the GDP and non-oil GDP, you could clearly see that the shift that happened towards the non-oil, to the oil sector. But even non-oil and non-government sector is even better than the traditional sector. It's even very clear when you look at the trade, and so you have a very clear movement of resources away from the traditional sector to the non-tradable sector. This is another example giving you about what happened to the non-tradable sector, especially the traditional sector, especially the red one. And this is the economy. That's the real economy of the South. That's the agriculture. It's having a very low level. Now, one of the things about the spending, the exchange rate, if you look here, this is the premium, the difference between the official and foreign market price. And what is happening is that people we have a very fixed exchange rate, which is actually in the Constitution supposed to be a flexible exchange rate. But what happened, the Central Bank of South Sudan fixed it. But then you have many people who are accessing the foreign exchange, either through the bureaus or through the commercial banks or through the black market. And you have a huge number of people actually benefiting from it. And this premium, in actual fact, it could even tantamount or even be equal to the total assistance coming to the South. Because this is a very clear case of a policy issue. That the central bank is not adjusting adequately enough in order to deny some of these people who are benefiting from a real policy that I see is affecting the South. And this is a real symptom and sign of the resource curves. This also, the composition of the revenue, I think is very important to look at this one, because virtually the non-oil revenue is equal almost 2%. While you could see the movement that the total revenue with the oil revenue, I mean the total expenditure seems to be quite moving together with the oil revenue. But even if you look at the question, you can be surprised that the non-oil revenue as a percent of total expenditure is almost 2%. And if you see capital expenditure, which is the real investment, is roughly near 20%. And the current expenditure almost about 80%. So you have economy towards expenditure, consumption, and away from the actual real production. What I said, physical compact, even the 2%, you could clearly see is just less than 3%. This is coming, actually, the non-oil revenue is coming from personal income tax and custom. Actually, when you look into this one, even this one is so linked to the oil, even the non-oil revenue is linked to oil indirectly. And it's so the relationship with the people and the government is so weak, there's no, and this actually, the argument is that they may not demand accountability from such a government that is not taxing its own people so that you can build relationship. If you come to the physical education and discipline, look at the accountability, look at security. When you go to the actual agriculture, rural development is just near less than 4%. When you come economies, it's very low. But the whole thing is focusing on the effective sector of the physical discipline, overspending, underspending. And in actual fact, the productive sector is affected and the service sector is affected. And this distortion of allocation is a very serious issue. Size of the government. Actually, I put that to the region. That you take the current physical spending, that is the salaries and the rest, and you compare it to the region, you will clearly see South is quite huge, it's quite substantial. Even when you talk about the civil servant wage bill, the South is almost about twice of the low income, but you cannot compare it even to Ethiopia, it's almost about. You can imagine the size of this government. But important in terms of the representation of the members of the parliament. Yeah. Southern Sudan, per a million, about 42 members of the parliament. When you compare it to Ethiopia or even Kenya, it's 5 members per a million. Huge government, extremely huge. Then I come to the issue of the volatility itself. And as you could clearly see, but the most important thing is not this volatility here, it's this one. Because I look at the volatility in terms of the standard deviation, but you can see how the expenditure is so volatile when you compare it to the oil revenue, especially in terms of coefficient variation. It's very volatile, but even more volatile when you compare it to the oil prices itself. So it's not about the volatility of the prices, international prices, the volatility of government expenditure, which is becoming even actually very serious. Now, this is another way of looking about the specialization, but just you look here. Just if you can focus on this. We have the export composition is that traditional goods just less than 0.2%. Oil is almost everything is oil. The service is 1.1. So the traditional sector seems to be not contributing so much to the economy. Now, this is about the economic analysis, but if you come to the real governance issues, I use the Sudan, because the Southern Sudan is coming out from the womb of this government called the Republic of Sudan. I use CPI, I did the Country Policy and Institution Assessment. Actually, Sudan is ranking consistently the worst. And Southern Sudan came out from this government. And by implication, actually, we wanted to use a similar thing for the South now, because it's very important about the low capacity in the, although you cannot say for sure that the South is having the same level. Okay? If you come to the corruption perception index, again, Sudan is the worst. The anti-corruption conducted a very clear study on the people perception of the prevalence of corruption in South. It's almost comparing to this level. Maybe this one is the only thing I cannot say that South has taken on, but in terms of the political rights and civil liberties, although the South of Sudan again is the worst, I cannot compare that. The South is almost similar because it's far better than some of these countries. So this is the aspect of the political dimension of the issue. Now, one thing is very important for you when you talk about the democracy and governance is the ethnic composition of the South. Even for you to rush for any elections or per se, this political patronage tends to stifle a democratic process and may not produce a good result. This is the composition of, ethnic composition of the South. Is a resource, but it could be a problem in terms of the political stability. But this is things that the South needed to deal with. Now, what are the options? I will be very brief here. I think we are seeing, based on the existing, it is like that we are going to see, even if we are going to have production, we are going to see a very clear trend of revenue getting down over years. These are some of the things I think are very important. I think the whole lot of physical discipline is very important in terms of sustainability and stability and value for money. And I think there's a need, especially when you come to the exchange rate policy, a very flexible exchange rate. But some of the resource rate policy is very important. What are the options available? I have a lot of work on that, because the traditional public goods seem to be a lot of problem. And people are now thinking whether we could have a transfer of this revenue oil directly to the communities or to the individuals. And the government of South Sudan has now embarked on a program of targeting the women with children under 5 years old age. But then you have a problem of identification of this. And but it's a good move of having a direct transfer to the communities. And they have a very good project also on the Constitutive Development Fund, which is a very good program also, through which you can actually transfer the resources to the people. But the whole of these are some of the issues about the governance that are very important. In conclusion, although I will be listening to you, I think for me, the shutting down of oil production is a real blessing in disguise. And I feel and provides opportunities. Because this scenario of South not relying on revenue is very important, because the scenario that's going to happen, and it is happening. And this one will help the South now to look at itself, how can they function without oil? And for me, it is a very positive, and that's why I believe it is important that people look at it from that perspective, of the fact that the South having this scenario is very important. I think current austerity measures, although one would appreciate what happened by the government by reducing 50% the non-salary of the budget, I think the government is big. It would be appropriate that the government to take it seriously of how to slim the size of this government, because it's not sustainable. As you could see, it's not comparable to any in the region here. It is very important that the South look at the short-term strategies, although the crisis of closure of the year the bridging funding. Because although it is a very popular decision of closure of the production, it was necessary, I think the South now should look for options. And the options are very tricky, very dangerous. Otherwise, you may end up with choices that may not be for the benefit of the people of South Sudan. And what I'm seeing now, either you have a commercial loans, or you could have, because you are not, the South is not a member of the IMF now, or the Chinese, because the West is even in terrible situation of the financial crisis. So looking for the bridging funding is important, because otherwise could have a very serious impact on the people's access to the basic services. I think this aspect of continuing negotiating with the North is very important on the pipeline. And I think it is very important for the South for the short run. Because what is happening in the North is just a reckless behavior, is unjustifiable, there's no any reason for it. But even with that one, the consequences are very grave, and it is very important that the South should continue engaging with the North. I think the South would be better off if they could make a deal with the North, so that you can now plan rigorously for your option of another pipeline. I think in the long run, option for the alternative pipeline is necessary, but it has to be based on an objective feasibility study that will focus on the technical aspect and geopolitical, economic, environmental, social, and security. I think it's a very important issue, because any option that the South is going to be taken, it should be based on a real thorough study. Otherwise, that one could create a very big, another dynamic within the region itself, because the choice of those parameters. I think the South needs a diplomatic strategy. I think the way the crisis is being managed, especially just China. I'm one of the people believing that China is so strategic for the South. And I think my own reading, the way I'm reading now, is that China seems to be leveled with Khartoum from the government of South. I think we're supposed to have a different approach to China. And we need to verify certain things. Sometimes we may need to have a silent diplomacy rather than going for a public, because by the end of the day, even the pipeline we are talking about, or the other bridge we are talking about, they will end up in China. It's not in Oslo, not in Washington, not in Europe. Because you could see what is happening in Europe today. They're actually going for rescue to get the funding from, or loans from China. And as a small nation, we have a lot to gain by not to have a real diplomacy that have to deal with China. And I think that's the only option I'm seeing for the South. I think international aid, I could see clearly that some people would like to pressurize the South in order to take option of dealing with the North by using aid, and I think that's not appropriate. I think the decision taken by the South is a conscious decision. Actually, the South has been pushed against the wall, and they were not having any other option. And I think it is very important that the international community stand up and to support this country, rather than pushing even against the wall in order to accept a deal that is not consistent with the priority and the national. And I think it's very important that international aid to be maintained, but to be refocused in such a way not to get the whole of this huge government. China, I think, it's not China, India, even Arab world. I think the South should be aggressive enough. Not to focus just only on a few countries, but I think Arab world is so important as an outreach. I think the long run, I know political stability of the South is very important, and SPLM needs to play a very important role in this. And I think, but for that role to be played by the SPLM, I think the SPLM should need to look to itself, but to create a space for others. And I think that's this is the pillars with which you can really manage these resources and to manage the crisis. The constitutional review process is a positive thing, but I believe it's not for the sake of elections, but I think whether we can have a very effective cross and check mechanism rather than just election per se. I'm very worried with this development now that people will be focusing on elections, and those elections, if they are not handled properly, can even divide the people of South Sudan further. And I think it's very important that we should be cautious of how best we can use this constitutional review process. I think a whole lot of capacity gap is a big, big problem for the South. What is happening, you have, we, in the SPLM, we were fighting the war, and then we are having coordination council that was so poorly managed, corrupt, and then you have a low capacity in the government, and then you have these huge resources coming. You tend to have a very high level of leakage. And I think the only way I'm seeing always, that is what I have been saying, that in the diaspora, they play a very important role in order to assist building this nation. And thanks a lot. I took a long time, and I will entertain your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luka, for this very interesting talk. I just have one quick question related to your concluding remarks, and before I open up the floor for other questions from the audience. As you show well during your presentation, oil is in many ways both at the same time South Sudan's central key possibility for the future, but also one of its main problems. And you, the current shutting down of the oil production can actually be a possibility opening up new avenues, notably in terms of negotiations with the North, but also in terms of looking into public expenditure and looking out for other possibilities. And I was wondering, not specifically related to this current crisis, but how can we move beyond this day-to-day dependency on the oil? Because as you also show, the oil resources in Sudan are not bound to be there for an eternal time. In the years, the oil stock is bound to decrease considerably over the next coming years, actually. So how can we move beyond this day-to-day dependency and to diversify the Southern Sudanese economy? Are there any immediate questions that we can take right away, or should we start with this one? Yes, good.
Evening. I work in the Women Church. My question is almost in line with you say that this is an opportunity for when the oil has been stopped for the South to try to diversify its economy and its growth. But what are the mechanisms in terms of capacity institutions to be able to help, and just not the government, but comprehensively, be able to help to direct and formulate new policies, to have the leakage, as you put it.
I think we can start with these two.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is an opportunity in a sense that, because I did not show you some of the aspects of the potential of agricultural potential in the South. The Southern Sudan currently is using only 3.4% of the arable land, the land that is so if just using the same technology, just using the same level of technology, and just doubling it almost 10 times, you could imagine a massive change. Just 3.4% of the land that's being utilized for agriculture. But if you look at the other potential is South Sudan, in terms of the Nile Basin, about 45% of Nile, the Nile Basin, 45% of the Nile Basin is in Southern Sudan. Almost 98% of the South is in the Nile Basin. And if you look to the tributaries of Nile, and you cannot imagine this country. The potential actually is one of the good indicators. Always I say is that the carbon dioxide emission of the South is the lowest in the world. I mean, this is something we are very proud of, and agriculture is organic in all aspects. But you could see one of the good aspects of what happened during the war, and we did some work also, the wildlife and the environmental changes. You see clearly that the South has a regrowth of forests in unbelievable way because of massive displacement of people to other countries. And so this is a country, but if you look at the potential in terms, actually I was looking at somebody about the forecast of the environmental changes. And they're saying that for the South in the next years to come, about 50 years, the South is going to have a very encouraging environmental situation. So you have all, and then if you look at the market, the prices of the commodity, agricultural commodity in the world, we're having a problem in the South looking just for food, World Food Program in the region. They fail to get the food in the whole region. They got it in Latin America, in Argentina. Unbelievable potential in terms of the number of tons of fish, fresh fish, in the Nile is just unbelievable. I met one of the diaspora who decided to come and invest within just 2 years, just having refrigerators and just meeting the demands in Juba and moving beyond, and is now having a turnover of not less than $250,000 a year. So this is the area. This is the potential of the South in terms of agriculture. Now, it is true it's not only, so this is the way people should be moved forward. But there's other aspect of the South also, besides agriculture, the minerals. We did some work with South African, an area called Kapoita and the Denga area, that's in eastern Equatoria. And we used to know the traditional mining exercise of gold. And they used an aerial survey, and they were shocked. The magnitude based on the indicators that they have, the magnitude of the minerals, especially uranium, coal, and the rest, unbelievable. And actually, this South Africa was telling us, look, actually you just forget about the oil. We have in a place called Kafekinji, the border area that we have been talking about, that's to the far of the west of western Barzazar. The Minister of Mineral was telling me, the Minister of Mining, it's called Mineral, he talked to me, he said, look at one of the things that we are seeing in western, the top most precious 10 metals are in that region. And actually was telling him, we are even actually talking to claim that area, basically because of the potential that area is having. So these are the potential for areas of diversification in the South. Now I think your question is very important. What are the institutional arrangements beside the government to make sure that we can tap why these resources are there and no movement towards these? I'm seeing the following from different levels, from the perspective of investment, of investor, and especially the private sector. I think this is an area that we may need to do a lot of work. I think the government, to ensure the issue of relative stability and security is very important. The few things people are hearing now about the South, either in Yongere or the rest, is sending a very wrong message to the people. Also, the institutional, the system. I know there's an investment law, but I think that investment law needed to be tested and to have a very flexible mechanism so that the investors will come easily, and then they can start over. I think these are very important policy issues for the South. One of the things usually I feel, who can take initiative in this sector? I'm one of the people believing that the diaspora, the problem, the diaspora could be a good way of tapping these resources. And they can, because they have a lot of experience outside here, and they will be able to get and take this risk rather than just getting the government to sign. We may need to look at we may need to look also at the serious investors. You might have heard the issue of the land grabbing, or it's happening now. You have very huge investors in area where they can come and then take the whole land and then start doing a lot of work. And that's creating a lot of fear actually about if you don't move now, some big guys will be coming. This is what I was telling you, not these big guys are not coming just only the South. I mean, you now is full of all sorts of people. Either somebody's coming with an idea about the pipeline, because then they applying about 40 or 80 applicants now for the pipe for the refinery, and the same number for people coming with loans, soft loans, and so you have all sorts of these people coming. But I think the South needed to have a serious engagement with the serious investors who could be able to do the business, but not undermining the local capacity.
Yes, there are some questions. Yeah, I will give you the. And please introduce yourself.
I'm Andrew Gray from Oxford University College. I think one of the problems in developing South Sudan is the low level of education in the country. And since it's the National Women's Day today, we can remind ourselves that only 2% of the girls in South Sudan finish primary, and it is very difficult to recruit girls to higher education because of this low level. And I also feel that the South Sudanese government is not actually investing enough in education. And I think the capacity in the government sector is low because the education level is so low in the country. What do you think about that?
Should we take just
the new state and promotion of peace and stability in the region? Because when I was at Madagascar, we have seen the problem in Sudan. When we were divided the two, the politicians in our country say that it's possible also in our area, for example, to be divided. So how a country like Sudan, who is divided to the new Sudan, can promote peace, for example, in the area, for example, Nigeria or Chad or the other country. And the second question, is the people in the south of Sudan ready to build the nation of South Sudan? Thank you.
Do you want to take these two questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, wait. Then
I'm just putting on here the issue of education. Just to show you the allocation, if you look at here, this is health, and this is education. It's nearly about 5% of the total expenditure going for education. But even if you take health, it's even less. Actually, when you put health, education, service together, they may not go with the accountability. These are the institutions, public institutions for and there's no, it's far below the low-income countries spend. And what you are saying about education is one of the things actually are having on the low capacity. Yes, you are having a system of education that is really corrupt and finished, the one of the old Sudan. And what is happening that the education system is producing really illiterate graduates that are going back into the system, a system that is having what I would call the South Sudan Coordination Council, which was used by the government to sue the South not to join the movement, but actually becoming so corrupt with a very huge number of the Bosnians. And those who are coming from the South, from the liberation struggle, they become just focusing on liberation and war, and they got themselves absorbed into these rotten civil service system that we got in the but then we have education that is generating and producing the graduates getting again into this system, becoming really even diluted, affected, inefficient, not appropriate even to manage. And that's why for the South, in order to break this cycle, you need to invest heavily a real serious primary education. Because that's the only entry point so that tomorrow you can produce a good graduate that can get into the system. So you have two options. You invest now in education so that you can go to have a good system in the future. Or, and then fill this gap by having diaspora. And it's very important what you are saying about in the long run. Otherwise, we are going to have a cycle of inefficient civil service, inefficient way of handling managing the state. And although we can be borrowing some people from, for example, the teachers we can, I think the most important thing for the South, a teacher is the core for development, a nurse, just investing in nurse and investing in a teacher. That is it. Rather than just building and whatever, but just a good teacher who can really provide service, a nurse can look after the nation. I think these are critical issues that the South needed to look at. And what's the good news also, especially this what we have been saying also for the development assistance, because these are the sectors that they need to focus on. I think it's very important that we should focus on education, especially on the international aid. Now, the South, are they ready? I think this is a nation that is so strong. These are the people who fought an unbelievable war over history. A consistent struggle. And I think when they shocked the world, when the way they voted is the determination to build a new nation. There's no doubt about the commitment and the determination of the people of South Sudan to build a new nation. It is true that we are facing a lot of difficulties, but I think the intention and the will of the people is so strong that they intend to build this new nation. Now, actually the South should be able to help in the regional stability. One of the things that people are saying now is whether we could have an economic integration, especially the Horn of Africa, because you see the Horn of Africa is having a lot of problems. Now, Sudan is becoming so reckless with its leadership to the level that it can come out becoming a source of real instability, whether in terms of the Islamic agenda that is coming now, and the way they diluted the Arab Spring with this Islamic movement, actually hijacking the democratic voices in those areas. It will take the Arab world to discover afterwards how might they have been, what the hijack that happened there. And that's consolidating the position of the Sudan in becoming so recklessly managing the affairs of the state, becoming a threat not only to the region, but even actually to the world. And I think the world is going to discover. But what we are seeing is that's why we need to look at the whole of Africa in terms of economic integration, so that even Sudan, we need to actually attract Sudan into this orbit and not to get out of hands. And one of the people even denying them not to become member of the East Africa, it is not healthy. And that's why even having an economic integration for the whole of Africa is going to be very important. South Sudan will play a very important role. Not only in building the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, but even between the East Africa and the greater Horn of Africa. Because the Horn of Africa cannot talk now without Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a big force, in terms of size and in terms of the growth that we are seeing. And any economic integration without Ethiopia is not healthy. Even for South Sudan, to get yourself a smaller grouping like East Africa, you are not getting a market for it, people are coming depending on you, that is not good enough. What is good enough for the South is having a bigger economic integration that, for example, Ethiopia, huge market, is where you can talk about economic integration. So I see that the South has a lot of potential in order to build regional stability in the long
run. My name is Sharif Harir, and I am a part of the opposition in the rest of Sudan. Now, I do agree with you, Dr. Biong, that the South Sudan, the Republic of South Sudan, must continue engaging the remaining Sudan. I don't know how. you characterize that North or whatever, because and that remaining Sudan also has a lot of problems. It might not remain one remaining Sudan for a long time to come. But however, I think looking at the track record of the engagement of the power holders in Khartoum, from an SPLA perspective, it has been, it has gone for quite a long time. 93, after the Declaration of Principles, IGAD Declaration of Principles, the engagement have continued, and if September 11 didn't take place in 2001, perhaps the CPA would have never been concluded in 2005. Now, from the conclusion of the CPA in 2005, you have had 3 years where SPLM was engaging the power holders in Khartoum to resolve certain fundamental issues which were supposed to be solved. They have not resolved. The nationality issue, the border issue, and now the petrol, until you are forced to shut down the production of the petrol. Now, SPLM has been engaging the remaining of Sudan for quite a long time without really leading to any results. Now, Bashir, the head of the regime in Khartoum, is saying he's ready to go to war with the South. And of course, there is war in many parts of the remaining Sudan. Darfur, where I come from, there is war. Blue Nile, there is war. South Kordofan, there is war. So, is it, this is probably, it's unfair to ask you that question, but you have been, you are an academic, you have been part of the government, part of SPLM. Is it prudent, actually, to continue this type of engagement with Khartoum? Or is it necessary to go and rethink what type of engagement, new type of engagement? Thank you.
My name is Thea Valters-Kines, and I work with the Ministry of Defense here also. Now you outlined quite clearly the need to trim down this inflated government in the public sector, and a large part of the public sector in South Sudan is the security sector. And it's been my understanding that having and maintaining an inflated army is part of a strategy for keeping the peace by providing an income and maybe a position to potential spoilers to the government and the state-building process in South Sudan. Now, in view of the income from oil disappearing now in the short term and potentially in the longer term, do you foresee that this will have a negative impact on the security situation? What will be the consequences of this for the security situation in South?
One third question.
Thank you so much. My name is David Marwan. I'm a student here. I come from South Sudan. Now, my questions are three. And one is, you have mentioned something to do with austerity measures, and in particular, cutting down the number of parliamentary members, who are at least now, according to your calculation, about 43 members per 1,000 population. I think that's a big number. Now, if we go by your suggestion and we reduce the number of these parliamentary members, we have the experience of 2010 elections, when Georgia told himself, when he lost the election, he went to the bush, fighting against the government. Now, if we reduce the number of these parliamentary members, given their background that they've been military, they have the experience of military functions, would they go back to the bush and fight against South Sudan? That's my first question. Two, I read one of your articles sometime in February, where you said the bold decision need bold actions, and that was, of course, talking about the shutting down of the oil. And you say we need internal actions and international actions. You have surely mentioned the internal actions including the safety measures. Now the international actions that comes into the aid from international community, Arab world, China, and so on. My question is, how long shall we continue doing this? They have already been assisting South Sudan for the last couple of years. Now you're asking them again to continue. How long will they continue doing this kind of activity? The third question is regarding education, partly mentioned before, and you have provided the answer, but we still have a number of students in Khartoum universities. These students have been cut short of time before they could finish their studies in Khartoum. Now they're in Khartoum, not longer Sudanese, but they are Southern Sudanese. What plan does the government have at current time to ensure that these students finish successfully or taken back to South Sudan where they finish there? Thank you so much.
Okay, let me Sharif, what you said is a very about how to deal with the government in Sudan. For me, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the South that is intended to build a new state. And these are the people who really suffered for such a long time. And Sudan is becoming a different country now. And I think it would be too much for the people of Southern Sudan to be dragged again into war, unless there's a very, very compelling reason why they should do so. And at the same time, the South needs to respect the sovereignty of that country. Now, but there is no doubt that having a viable Southern Sudan will entirely depend on the viability of a system in the north. That is for sure. Is it good enough for the South to not to engage with this government? Because this government is too bad. I'm one of the people, I'm very, very clear in terms of what I think about President Bashir and the issue of ICC and the rest. I'm very clear about that. But as far as the South is concerned, I think it is very important for the South to pursue their strategic interests, their own survival and meeting the needs of the people, even if it means for them to deal with Bashir. And it is by necessity. Because any reform that's going to happen should happen from within the people of the North. And I think Sudan is well known for uprising. I mean, this is a nation that actually told the world about uprising in 60s, in those years. Why they are not doing it, I think a lot needs to be done. But I think it is very important for the South to engage with good intention that they want to build a new state. But any change in the North, it should come from the people of the North. It doesn't mean, for example, that we should not engage with Khartoum. By the way, even for the people of South Sudan, they will be very cautious about what I'm seeing now. The periphery of the Sudan are now at war with the center. But there's some guys waiting somewhere in Khartoum, you know that. Just for them, the world will follow that we have, and they get into power, they hijack. Imagine the way they hijack the uprising in the Sudan. It took them, imagine, we're thinking that these people are going to stay for 1 year. Now with such a huge unpopularity, there's no way you can even take them now. But if there are people waiting, we know them. Even if they come with, sometimes we may be even better off having Bashir than some of these people, they will come. So really it's very important for the South to be very cautious what they would like to see. The responsibility of the South is the humanitarian side, especially the people of Nova Mountain, Southern Brunei, and Darfur. If there are refugees that are coming to the South, it is important for the South to capitalize on this and even to stand up for humanitarian access to these people. And I think that's very, very important because it is the desire for the South to go for war is not there. And I think there should not be. And even there's no leader who can think of taking the South war with the North. Is Bashir ready to fight? I don't think so. I don't think so. He may try to do a lot of things, because even if he can start bombarding, doing whatever, I think the information we have is quite telling. I think this is a system that is cracking, actually having a lot of problems. And even the South should not be dragged into this language of war, because Bashir cannot fight. Because even for them, let him settle what is happening to the North rather than come and fight in the South. I know he would like to mobilize the North in order to have an agenda, because Islamic agenda, jihad, finished, he exhausted it, finished it. He actually finished with Islam. And there's no way he can mobilize people again, that you will let us go and fight the South. He will not get those people. Even now I learned that there's a few school children are being dragged into war now, but that's the end of the day. So I think it's very strategic, and this is your question is very important. It's very strategic for the South to have a very strategic engagement with the North. Focus on your interests and the interests of the South, building a new nation. The pipeline is there. If there's a possibility you use it, you make use of it. But don't focus about the regime change. It should not be the agenda of the South at all. It is the agenda of the North. But I know your question is, I don't want to get to the other aspects of it. Let me come to the security sector reform. You know, one of the things that we managed to have we could not having a huge army. It was by necessity, because the South was focusing on consolidating its unity of achieving the referendum. And I think one of the biggest achievements of the government of South Sudan, especially President Self, he managed to unify the people of the South at a very high cost. Even in terms of the real fighting force of the SPLM, some people got promoted even above the actual fighting force. And he achieved it at a very high cost. And I think it was necessary that you move that path. Now, have you finished? Are we finished with the business? Because I am talking about the issue with social measures. You know, I am not sure whether would be a downsizing of the army now is necessary, but I think needed to be done in a very thorough way. You remember, I don't know whether you know the DDR, how the United Nations let us down with the DDR program. A huge resources availed, and they were not used effectively. And it's one of the things we are very clear, even the last minute they came and then they left. And in any conflict area, when it went up to the peace, the DDR is a very important component. And I think this is an area that the international community to engage with the SPLM, with the government of South Sudan, about the whole of the DDR, because you need to look for options. Because these are the people, some of them, I'm not talking about the core SPLM, some of the people who are using the counterinsurgency warfare. And these are the people actually, their desire for instability is so high because this is part of the livelihood. Even the level of crime will be very high because that's the way they have been surviving, in confusion. And you need to handle them properly. And the appetite of Khartoum is very clear, looking for them in order to use them to destabilize the South. And that's the area that the South needs to be very cautious of how to make sure, and this is where the international community should really come in to assist the people of South Sudan. But there's no doubt, the payroll cleansing is very important for you to reduce. I know, and that's why I'm saying even the salaries, why not engage in salary? Because I know still we have a huge cost now still in the public service, leave alone the government. And that's why the salary is very important that to be targeted as part of the austerity measures. Now, again, I don't know whether I have answered you about the is it possible for you to have a huge government so that you sustain people to come out of government? I think this is the issue of the SPLM. That's why I believe the SPLM should start working now, as of now, before the election, having a mechanism that will avoid such type of people. But it's not possible for you, because if you have a constitution, because what is happening now, the constitution that we have now, the existing constitution, we have about how many? you have about 336 members of the Assembly, National Assembly, and you have about 50 council of state. You almost have about 400, almost 380 something members of the Assembly. I did not even this number, I did not include the structure at the state level. It's huge. It's unsustainable. What you do, you have the constitution, pass the constitution that could really reduce the size of the government. Because this is the commitment of the SPLM that you have a lean government. This, Dr. John has been talking, even Central has been talking about a lean government. But you cannot have a lean government unless you sustain it. If you don't sustain it and you raise expectations, now after having an independent South Sudan, you cannot have a sustainable state. It's not affordable. And I think the whole thing is how we can focus at the lower level, especially at the county level. Because this is the level that we need to invest in. But having these people sitting in Juba, I think it's not worth it. And above all, let me just give you the people who are benefiting from government. How many? How many in the civil service? Maybe, I am not sure, it could be 100 or 152. These are the people benefiting from the government. And you see the focus of the government is focusing on this group of people who are sitting in the offices. What about the rural areas? Where is the majority? Because if the government is relying on the majority rural area, this rural area is not benefiting from the salaries, from current expenditure, they are not benefiting from it. And your focus should be the majority rural area. These are the people actually you are not targeting. And if you politically you can engage with the rural South Sudan, then you have a real political mandate. And you can handle these elites, the urban buyers, that's in Juba or Khartoum, I mean in Juba or Malakal or Wow. They are really minority. They are really minority. And are they delivering? Because these are the issues that you need to deal with the public. I think downsizing the government is quite important. International community. You know, we have, I know we may be, the situation that South is in now, I think it is very important for the international community, two things. To understand why they took such a decision. And there's unjustifiable blame for this government, why did they do so? But people, they don't ask themselves why, what option available to the South? If they could continue having a government in the North actually robbery, looting your own resources, and you want to pump the oil in order leave alone the humanitarian acts, you can level, whatever you want to level about this government in Khartoum, actually we exhausted all the words to describe this government. Yet for the South to decide not to, just because to supply this government with the oil, so that it cannot be looted. And the international community to appreciate that. I think this is an issue that I feel is very important for them to work together and let engage the international community to understand why the South took such a decision. But the South also should not assume that everybody will be happy with them. Because there's no way you assume that people will be happy with you. And there's no way also that you have your oil underneath, and you come and you ask again for assistance. Unless you articulate it in a very good way. So there's no way you sit down on these facts, and then this is what I say, diplomatic deficit by the South, because we have not been engaging our friends in a very effective way. But the will is there, and I think we should use it for the good of the people of South. I think for education, one of the things that we're discussing in the post-session is about education, about the universities. In actual fact, in ideal situation, we should have to leave even the Southern Sudanese to continue their education in the North, while we have a very slow process of transferring the university graduate to the South. But now everything become emotional, and it's really it's out of hand. Even for the Northern Sudanese to continue with their education in the South. And you could look for the issue of a scholarship and even for education to be free. But look the way the Sudan government handled it. It's just a crisis. I don't know, but I know the Minister of Higher Education is working very effectively. How best we can link together all to the East Africa and why we're developing the, you might have heard even some of these students are going for demonstration, calling for Arabic to be the language of instruction in the school. You could see how Sudan is becoming so, South Sudan is becoming very strange. But I think it's a challenge. But the problem is that the quality of higher education that we have. Otherwise, we're recycling people that are not so good to the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Luka Biong, for your lectures. I just want to say that for South Sudan, it needs very much to be positive and forward, because there is a lot of challenges, as there are challenges for the North because of the price has been paid for the peace. 70% of the resources from oil and third of the land, everything, and a lot of resources, and the economy is in a state of shock because of this loss. But it's a price which we voluntarily paid for peace. I think the same challenges are for the South. There are many challenges also for the South: education, transparency, health. There is a lot of challenges that we have to focus on. I agree with you very much for the argument that we have to. The South must be strategically involved in negotiations with the North, because we really, both of us, we are very much needing each other. The South is interdependent, and the North also to the South. And I think if we concentrate more on how to achieve two viable states, this will be more helping to us than to propagate for uprising in each country. We must not work on destabilizing each other, because it's very harmful for both of us. We must know this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bjørn Wold. I'm from Statistics Norway. And I had the pleasure to meet Luka Biong Deng already back in 2005, when he was, at that time, he was head of what today is the National Bureau of Statistics. And I had the pleasure to travel to Juba and also to some of the rural areas. And I'd like to say, Dr. Luka, that your speech was very interesting. And I'm very pleased for all the very good advices you are giving on how to avoid the possible curse or potential curse of resource-rich countries. But I'd like to challenge you to answer what is the likely road ahead. I have to admit that sometimes I'm not that happy with the decisions, and even not with the discussions in the parliament, focusing on issues like to build a new capital, for example, rather than invest in infrastructure that could open the country up for the type of economic growth that you were talking about. So my question is really, what do you think is the likelihood of the elite and the political system, being both the government as such and the National Assembly, to work along the path you are advising, rather than discussing issues like a new capital and so on? Of course, then the follow-up question is, what is your recommendations for in a way for countries like Norway, which are considering themselves as a friend of South Sudan? How can they assist you in this? You have, of course, to do the job yourself, but we may assist you, and you of course have to find the path yourself. But what are your recommendations for for friends in Norway, how to really support in the proper direction? Thank you.
Okay, you. My name is Birgit Philipsen, ADRA, Norway. We are working with education in Eastern Equatoria. And I was happy to hear your assessment about the importance of primary education. However, you also mentioned the importance of developing agriculture. And I was thinking maybe we need to look a little bit further than just look beyond primary education. This would be a wonderful opportunity to actually look into secondary and further education and make it very, what should I say, down to earth and practical. We see in many countries we focus maybe on going up to university education, and we have students that come out with no job opportunities, no abilities to really develop their country. So South Sudan, in my opinion, would have a very important issue to face now. What kind of educational system are we creating there? And how can we actually work together in developing something that can really bring income to the country?
Thank you. Yes, I think we can take some few more questions afterwards.
I think for the, yes, I've taken your point, is, I think strategic thinking by the South of two viable states is quite important. And one of the things that African Union, during our negotiations with the Sudan government, we're focusing on how can we create a two viable state, and what does it mean, and the implication for the two countries. Although always I say I am seeing a very hopeful picture, besides the bumpy process for the South, a viable state emerging, I mean, in the South than in the North. And that's going to create a big problem. Because even though the South cannot be viable, it's not going to be sustainable if the North is really in that position. But you need to do it cautiously. But I think that's a commitment. That's the thinking within the South. What I'm seeing even in the North, the leadership in the North, the way they are losing opportunities. Because what happens is that you are pushing the South against the wall, even to looking for other options. And what is very clear now, the South becoming a member of East Africa, looking around the region, and the North is losing that one, because what is going to happen is that the North is going to isolate itself.
But the North already is member to many other regional groupings.
Yeah, those groupings are very far there.
Yeah,
you know, those regionals.
They are very much connected to it culturally and everything.
That's fine, but the point I'm saying.
Because you know, accession to an economic grouping is not a criteria to the viability of a state. You know, already Sudan is a very old, you know, kind of infrastructure. It is incomparable to the North, to the South. You know, that doesn't mean that we hope that the South will be left or undeveloped. You know, in the normal situation, if you are a father or a mother, you want your son or daughter to be better than you, definitely. You know, we have the best wishes to the South, but the South, you know, in a very short time of its living now, is trying to destabilize the North and trying to have, you know, to harbor the opposition for the North. It's very destabilizing situation now, which we have been talking about. You know, it's very well known to everybody. Isn't it?
Let me give. I came from ABA, I think 4 days ago.
I know
the
that
border.
you are a state man, you have been in the government.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know everything about the government. You have been a minister in the government.
Yeah.
I respect your argument.
Yes, and what I'm saying, I came 4 days ago from ABA, along the north-south border there, and I saw what the government decided to do to close the border, and how the people are struggling to get around so that the goods could come to the northern part of the South. Because the goods coming from East Africa are so far. But there's a very deliberate intention that the South, the North are closing the border. What I'm saying, it is not about COMESA, it is not about African Union, it is about practical issues How can we have soft borders? And what is happening now, the people are using for different ways of getting the goods to the south, because of the economic interest, as well as the desire for them to continue their relations. What I'm saying is that a viability, and that's why having, in the long run, achieving what we lost by not having the united country, it is very important that the Sudan to come to this orbit. And this will make them to be sensible.
But this is, the accession to this organization. It needs, it's a gradual thing. It's not overnight thing. It's a gradual. If Sudan will be accepted as a member of East African movement, this is a process. You know about it. It's a political process.
But anyhow, the point I want to make is that it is true. It's very important that the viability of two states is so important for all of us. But I think a lot of desire from the Sudan. Whatever the argument, there's no way I can imagine. Imagine I was sitting down with Syrian nomads that are just struggling by themselves, dealing with the south in order to access water and pass in the south. And Khartoum is so distant. While Khartoum is sitting in Nairobi or in Addis, to put conditions in order to expel out the southerners from the north. This is the political issue that I feel the leadership of the north is facing. And for me, for the sake and for their own survival, I think looking at the south positive is not the south that they used to know. But I think that's the point that we need to engage and then to have a two viable states. I think that's a very important. Now, what is the livelihood ahead? Should we take, I was so hopeful when I was engaged in the post-secession arguments, and I was seeing that really, and even the way the leadership of the North started behaving, accepting the referendum results, even making a very powerful statement, and I was so hopeful that if we build on those things, I think the North-South relation will improve a lot. Until the invasion of Abyei, you might have known what happened, and then we lost everything. I have a conviction, and I know the livelihood, because I see clearly that how much we are seeing so cloudy, very discouraging. I have a conviction that the Sudanese, especially the South and the North, eventually they will come to an agreement. And that agreement, I know for sure is not for the interest of the two countries.
Not with this stuff.
No, I resolved that issue I think we resolved that issue earlier. We resolved that issue. And look at the country, not the leadership, the country. So I feel that there's a possibility that they can resolve the issue of oil, but I know for sure it will be dependent on how they resolve the issue of Abyei and the borders. And it's something I feel it is good to look hopefully into that future. Because what I know, these people are exhausted. Even the Sudan government are talking about fighting, there's no way they can fight. Because they are there. And the reality that also they underestimated the South. They didn't know. They underestimated whether the South was able to take the decision to close. Actually, the closure of the production was shocking to everybody. Because everybody was seeing that the South cannot do this one, and they will not do, because they are depending so much on oil. But I know this is for sure that the result of the bottleneck on the oil and Abyei, I think we can get away. Now coming to Norway, what we expect from Norway. I talk about the short term and the long term. I think Norway needs to engage the two parties in finding a solution for the pipeline and even Abyei, because of the even diplomatic engagement. That role is very important, but I think it is very important Norway also to irresponsible or a claim by the Sudan government of 36 per barrel is unjustifiable and unacceptable. And it is very important Norway to come out clearly, and I think they have done it, but in order to push Sudan to a reasonable level. But at the same time, for the South, for Norway to come also assist in finding a solution to issue of apartheid, because they are so interrelated. And through its diplomatic work, I think it can do that one. Second, while the South is looking for other options, especially for the pipeline or the refinery, I think it is very important. Norway has a good experience in this area, a technical on the feasibility studies of what the options available for what decision the South needs to take in terms of the pipeline. And I think that technical aspect is very important. The third is the developmental assistance. And I think in this situation, I don't know, I suppose, for example, now we are going to involve in the census. It's the area that I said earlier, it's a very small amount, but it has a lot of implication in terms of either downsizing or in terms of economic development. And I think that census is one of the areas that I feel issue of security reform, issue of water, education and agriculture. These are the strategic areas that Norway should not slow down in the level of assistance to the South. But Norway should play a role also, because there are some developmental, some countries are questioning to what level they will continue to assist the South. I think Norway could help also in terms of diplomatic outreach to its partners of how they can assist. One of the biggest issues I feel is a problem is the issue of China, how the South deals with China. It is a big issue. And I think the South, as I said, we are not handling them properly. I'm very clear on that. But I think it's very important Norway also to assist in terms of building the bridge with China through its diplomatic engagement. Now the last question is about, I think just a comment, I think I have taken note of what you said. It's not only, my focus on the primary education, because that's the focus now. Because the moment you invest heavily in primary education as a basis, you will have a very positive impact on secondary education. And even one of the things that we may need to look at the issue that this capacity gap is specialized training and the capacity building training. And I think this is an area that we can have how can we recycle or really recondition those who are in the civil service and make them in such a way to become more productive so that they can actually become an engine of public management of the affairs of the country. But your point is definitely right.
We have just a few minutes left, and I have 2 more speakers on my list, so if you can try and be very brief, and so we will conclude around those 2 last questions.
Thank you. The question regards the overspending issue. What exactly does it mean, the 51% for accountability? And the other one is I'd like your comments on this land ownership issue, where we're leasing large tracts of land to foreign entities. And, what do you think about that? South Sudan doing that?
Thank you for the nice presentation. Also regarding the land, I'm not sure, but I heard that there is a company working in Boma, is owned by this man. I'm not sure about that. Yeah. I hope that you may know it better than me, since you are a key person in the government system in South Sudan. So my wonder is this: who is the primary beneficiary of that company? The company dealing with the animals. That's what I heard. In other words, how can that company help growth economy of Southern Sudan?
Thank you.
Joseph, what is happening is here, the underspending is that if you have the budget, allocated funds, did you spend according to the budget or not? Did you overspend or did you underspend? And as you could really see, the underspending sector tends to be the productive sector and the service sector. And overspending tend to come from the, from what you can see from the big institutions like institutions of accountability or security and law enforcement. So that is a very clear case of a budget discipline that tends to not to favor the productive sector, but to focus on other sector. And it's a pattern that usually you see in any resource-rich countries, that they undermine agriculture badly in the productive sector. So it's a pattern that is known by the. I think for the land, we have now a law of the land law, but I think we may need to look at the implementation of this law. What happened during the war, during the negotiation, we're discussing about the issue of communal ownership of land. And that was a very strategic engagement of the SPLM with the Sudan. Now what is happening is that it has been perceived differently, and that's creating a lot of issues now, because we say, although the land is owned by the people, but then you have different levels of government will be managing the land on behalf of the people. And becoming a problem at that level, who are these, especially at the lower level, you get some community leaders are actually acting on behalf of the people in order to, huge number of land has been given now to private companies, but it's not also it's scrutinized, and it's not done in a very inappropriate way. But it's a big issue. You might have heard about the recent development that is happening around Juba, between the Bari and I think that we have Dinka, Nuer, and people from Turkey. So it is creating a lot of issues. The politicization issue of land is becoming a problem, because you have elites who have emerged, assuming that they are representing the government. I mean the people. And these are the people actually benefiting from the issue of land. This coming again, I did not answer your question about the issue of capital. I'm very clear about the issue of capital. It's not reasonable. It's not timely. It's not justified. And even the way the government is doing it, because we have the constitution itself, is very clear. Because the constitution is saying the capital city is Juba. And what is happening is that for you to change the constitution, you need 2/3 members of the assembly. And if you have an executive position, you should be actually recommending the amendment of the constitution. And what I'm seeing is that the government is deciding by itself on executive, and they did not subject this one to the constitutional process. And it's supposed to be passed by the assembly. Let them amend the constitution so the capital city is not Juba. But as far as the constitution is concerned, it is Juba. But the whole thing is, for me, whether it's justifiable or not. Because if I'm going to invest about almost about $10 billion US in a new capital, is it time now? Do we need it now? By the time you have the worst records of maternal mortality in the world, because there's no way you can justify this one. But I know this is my personal opinion. I'm very clear on that one, because I don't see it as right. But even the worst part of it even is whether it could contribute in the cohesion and unity of the people of South Sudan. And I know that there are some people in Juba, especially some of the elites from certain communities, are utilizing this issue of land in order to discourage people. But that one should not push the government to react. I think it should provide a political challenge for the SPLM to convince and to deal with the people in the community, rather than shifting the capital because of dissatisfaction of certain communities. Because wherever you go, you'll get people. You will definitely get people. So really the challenge is how to engage, as a leadership, is how to engage with these people. If you take it to my home area, it's a big issue. If you think about the capital of all the 10 states, you get them, they have a lot of problems. This is a general problem. But the problem is not time, actually. It's not time to engage on this issue of Boomer. I was engaged in this project. personally, because there was a time, two things happened. We conducted in 2000, I think, in 2000 in Buma area, about wildlife survey. It was a very massive one. The first wildlife survey in Buma conducted in 1982. And through the AID, we wanted to assess what happened to the impact of war on the wildlife. And it turned out that, for example, the wild ear cock is used to about 1.2 million. This is seasonal migration in the Boma area. In 2000, I think 2001, 2002, we found that actually this population almost reduced by half. And then it started coming back afterwards. And I think the recent survey is showing a very big this migration coming to a normal pattern. It's almost exceeding now 1 million, the wild ear cock. Now, but you are now having about issue, what could you do to make the ecotourism? Because you know, when you talk about Morley, it's one of the areas, the richest area in the south, in terms of leave alone the wildlife and I mean, potentially you see a lot of interesting. It's an amazing area, the Yongre general, but particularly the area of Morley. So one of the things that I think by then they don't brought in the wildlife society, and they were so interested in developing the Buma area, but they were more of a general preservation of wildlife, but not having a component of investing in it. This specific investor was so keen in getting investment in tourism, and it got subjected to a lot of discussion with the communities. I know there was some concern, but I think they sat down and a lot needed to be disciplined. You know, our problem is that with the development is that people, they expect so much. And at a certain point, people, they would like to get a certain feedback. And they say, look, these people, they want to encourage tourism. After the tourism, there will be employment, there will be a lot of this thing, and you'll be consulted. I think the anti-attitude towards any foreign investment, and especially coming from the Arab world, created a bit of a problem. But it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity, I believe, how you can make use of your resources, the wildlife. Okay?
Thank you very much. I think we will conclude there. Thank you very much, Dr. Luka Biong Deng, for all your very reflective questions to some very complex, your reflective answers to a lot of complex questions. It was extremely interesting to listen to you, and I hope you all join me in thanking you for this very interesting talk.